We have a bulletin just received.
I've never encountered anything like this before.
In this video, we're going to explore some Photoshop tools that may be specifically helpful in creating and manipulating images for your color harmony assignment. This instruction covers creating and saving colors in Photoshop using the brush tool for digital painting and demonstration of some tools that you can use to colorize elements or portions of elements so that they fit within your color harmony. Let's start with a new document, File, New, inches, say 14 inches wide, 10 inches high, 360 pixels per inch like they like in the Output Center, RGB color, and Adobe RGB. Okay. So I have a new blank canvas, creating and saving colors. For your color harmony project, you're going to have certain colors that you work with and maybe variations of those colors with different color intensities or different values, darks or lights, because you're going to work with the colors in your color harmony and create an image using nothing but those colors. In the Tools panel, the colors down here are your foreground color and your background color. The foreground color is what you'll paint with. You have a little tiny black and white square up here. If you click here, then you change it to black and white automatically. If you want to select a new color, go click, and you can select a color. And again, let's go to something that's magenta-y. And pick a really intense color here. And I hit OK. And now notice my foreground color has changed to the magenta color that I selected in the color picker. You just go click, and then you move this here to select the basic color area in the rainbow, in the prism, and then you work here to do dark, light, color intensity, and make more specific changes to the color. And you can see you have a before and an after. So I can hit OK. So the color picker is one way to pick colors. The swatches panel. The swatches panel, including primary and secondary RGB colors here. There are other libraries underneath. If you click on the little triangle here, you can add extra colors and kinds of colors. And you can also save colors by creating a new color swatch over here. That same new symbol like in the layers panel. So let's say I created a green color that I want to save, and now it's the foreground color. If I go to that new swatch icon and go click, then I can call it something. I'll call it basic green, and then let's say I wanted a darker version, and notice the green color has been saved right here. So let's say I want a darker version, and go click, and I can drag down. Here's the other color, here's the new color. I can call that one, I'll save it, dark green. Right, and here's my dark green swatch saved next to my original green. If I click back on the original green, now I'm painting with that for the foreground color. I can click on it again, make it a lighter green. And I'll save that, and I'll call it light green. And then I could switch to the magentas. And I could save that. My magenta. And hit OK. And this is probably what you're going to want to do. It is worth noting, as I said, that all the primary colors and the secondary colors are already in your swatches. So here's RGB red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. But unless you're selecting a color harmony that involves only those colors, then you're going to need to create your own, and you're probably going to want to create versions of them anyway for darks and lights so that you can work with different values of the color. So if you're doing a digital painting, for instance, you could work with the new palette that you've assembled. So if I select the dark green color I just made, I'm painting with that color. If I select the magenta color, I'm painting with that color. So if you want the simplest formula for creating and saving colors, you can go to the color picker, click, and pick a color, hit OK, and then in the swatches, hit the new swatch, click, call it something, and save it to your swatches. Then click on it later to make that color your foreground color to paint with or do other stuff with. The brush tool. So let's create a new layer to draw on, which is always a good idea to do. Let's go to the icon down here. Again, if you leave your mouse over it, it says create a new layer. Click. And we have a new blank layer created to paint on. So all of this stuff up here, when you select the brush tool, is about features for the brush. This is where you can adjust the brush size. Hardness means blurriness or non-blurriness. If you go all the way to the left, it's as blurry as can be. If you go all the way to the right, it's not blurry at all. So let's start out by selecting the standard brush right here at 100% hardness and adjust a size. And you can see by the cursor here what the size of your brush is. If you don't see that, if you see this instead, and you can't see your brush size anymore, it means you have the caps lock on the keyboard. So tap on the caps lock key, tap, and now you have your cursor back with your brush size. This is the painting mode. So your paint reacts in different ways with the paint underneath it, which is similar to layer modes over here. But we don't need to talk about that right now. Let's just leave it on normal. Opacity is how opaque or transparent the paint is right now. Let's leave it at 100% opacity so it's completely opaque, not see-through at all. And the flow involves how much push your paint needs to get started, like a paintbrush. Let's just leave that at 100% right now. So these two things work with a drawing tablet. And if you're painting in Photoshop, it is much easier to work with a drawing tablet. We have Wacom tablets that are available for checkout. So if you clicked on this icon here, it uses pressure on the drawing tablet for opacity. The harder you press, the more opaque the paint is. But let's not do that right now. Let's go over here though, and you can see when you leave your mouse over it, always use pressure for size. So if we press on this, which we will, click, then you get thicks and thins when you're using your drawing tablet. I have a drawing tablet connected right now, and if I use my paintbrush, I can get thicks and thins by pressing down harder or softer. So when you're using a drawing tablet where the line width changes by pressure, then make your brush size a little bigger than you normally would so you can allow for that variation in pressure. Okay? So if we decide we don't want the layer, we can hit the trash can and get rid of our paint. Got rid of that layer, so I'll make a new layer to paint with. I'll make that brush a little bit smaller. And basically you could draw here, you could sketch it out, and some people even do rough sketches on a single layer, then switch to another layer, and they then use that as a guide, and then they get rid of that later. Okay, but I'll just draw a little comic booky superhero guy. So the reason I had you draw on a new layer is because we can click and make another layer and drag it underneath. And we could call it something like, I'll call mine color underneath. Because that way, when we color, I'll pick a magenta color. We can color underneath, but let the lines show. Okay, I colored our figure. Now I'm going to use the eraser tool, and it has all the same controls and features as the brush tool. And I am going to make it 100% opaque so it erases totally. And I'm going to erase and clean up my document, my character here. Then I can go click on here, and I can keep the same essential color but make a darker version by pulling down on the color picker. I'll hit OK. So then I'll go back to my brush and I can color I can make a slightly less dark version. And every time I do this, I could be saving my swatches. In the swatches panel, I could be clicking here, save it as a new swatch. We call it medium magenta. So I could come back and paint with this later. Working with some of that medium color here. And I could make a really light color for highlights. And if I want to blend the paint together, I could use the smudge tool. The smudge tool, and again, you can control how much it smudges, how big it is, but you can blend your paint together. And again, you'd have to have all of your paint on a single layer in order to do that. But I can smudge, I can blend the paint together here if I wanted to. So again, it's like blending wet paint together. Fill with color. And then let's say I wanted to give it a background fill of that green color. So I'm going to call this one green. And I'm going to drag it below the layer that says color. So it's underneath because I want to fill the background with a green color. I'm going to go to a good basic green color and hit Edit, Fill, and select Foreground Color and hit OK. So now we have a background that's the green color. Painting with semi-transparent colors. So we could select the eyedropper tool right here and then click on an area to sample that color. So then you would be painting with that color. But if you have the brush selected, you can also do a shortcut. You can hold down the Alt Option key and the brush turns into an eyedropper. Now I just have the brush tool selected. I'm holding down Alt Option. I can go click and I'm sampling that color. We can adjust the opacity. When we reduce the number to below 100, then it becomes semi-transparent. And if we make it very transparent, then we can start to build up colors in underpainting by going over areas gradually and blending colors that way, just like a traditional painter. Some people actually use the traditional Renaissance method of painting, building up tones in sepia and then using semi-transparent layers of paint on top of that and building up tones of color gradually over the sepia underpainting. Colorize. So in the color harmony project, your first project, you're going to work with a color harmony and only work with the colors in those harmonies when you're producing an image. So if I'm doing a complementary color scheme that only has two colors, magenta and green, then that means I'm producing the entire image in magenta and green with differences in value and color intensity. So I want to show you some ways that you can alter photographic images and make them conform to your color harmony choices. Let's go to File, Open, and number 1, Colorize. And this image might look familiar. Now it has two layers, the layer for the guy and the layer for the background. So let's make sure the guy layer is selected. And we want to go to Image, Adjustment, Hue and Saturation. And we've used hue and saturation several times already, but this time we're going to use the one feature that we haven't used before. We're going to go to Colorize, and you can see it makes everything values of a single color, right? So we want to go towards the magenta part over here, and we'll saturate just so we can see it, but we want to get as close to magenta as possible. And it's okay to use your eyeballs on this instead of being absolutely exact, but you want to be in the ballpark. Most color relationships are approximate in compositions. So I'm going to saturate even more just so we can see the difference. And I'll hit OK. And I'll select the background layer. And I'll go to Image, Adjustment, Hue and Saturation. And it's already green, so I'm going to make it a green color. I'll increase the intensity there too. And that's a little too yellow. Okay, that looks pretty close to actual green. And if I hit OK, so I have technically created a composition in just a few seconds that conforms to my color harmony. Of course, your composition needs to be a lot more sophisticated than this, and it should represent 2 weeks worth of work and careful thought. The color replacement brush. But now let's explore some other tools for coloring your images. Going to History, retracing my steps to before I did the hue and saturation. And this time I'll use the color replacement brush. I'm going to zoom in on his face. And I already have the green color selected, and underneath the brush tool is the color replacement brush. Click. It's the one with the little square here and the little curved arrows. So I'm going to select hue because it'll give me a subtle look. You can experiment, but I'm picking hue, and you can see I can change individual areas to the color that I want with differences in value, just like I would with Colorize for the whole image when I paint over them. And I'll pick a magenta color, which I've already saved. So now my magenta color is the color that I'm painting with. So you could colorize individual elements. And again, this is not an example of a successful execution of the project. I'm just trying to give you some quick, simple instruction on tools that you can use. Replace color. Let's go to the History panel all the way to the top. Click on the top, click, and that brings you back to where you were again. One other thing, Image, Adjustments, Replace Color. Image Adjustments, Replace Color. We select it. We select a color that we want to replace. So I'll select like a medium flesh tone here. And then we want to replace it. Click Result. And I'll go pick the green swatch that I saved. Click. So I'm replacing it with green, everything that's that color. And if I adjust the fuzziness, I can select more or less. I could adjust the hue here or the saturation or the lightness, but I'll leave it like it is. So everything that's this color, and again, more selected, less selected, I'll keep it about here, and I'll hit OK. Then I could go to Image Adjustment, Replace Color again, and I could sample some of the areas that are still flesh toned. Click on the Results area, and I'll sample the magenta that I've saved. I'll hit OK. And then, again, I can increase that or decrease that, and maybe I'll decrease the saturation on that so it looks a little less funny. And then if I do that, I think I would go in on some of the areas that look a little mechanical and predictable and use the paintbrush and paint in some nicer shapes. So you can use image adjustments, replace color, to replace individual colors with colors from your color harmony. So to complete this assignment, you have to select a color harmony, and then you have to select colors that are inside of your color harmony, that work with your color harmony. So you have to look on the color wheel and say, okay, I want to do a triadic color scheme where 3 colors are equally spaced around the color wheel. So I'm going to select these 3 colors to work with differences in value, darks and lights, and differences in color intensity. And those are the only colors I'll work with in my assignment. This concludes your technical instruction for the first project. We'll have some additional instruction in Photoshop as part of our technical instruction for our second assignment. One more video to watch for this project though. It's an introduction and short tour of our Digital Output Center where you'll print your digital file for this project.